Hello and welcome to the Nintendad Coffeehouse, where the coffee sucks, but at least there's games to talk about. I'm your host, Lachlan Bruce, and I am joined by Derek.
Hey, what up?
And also joining me is Abram.
Everyone.
Okay, so this is the first time we're doing this, so forgive any weirdness. Though I'm a weirdo, so this probably is going to get weird. What have we all been playing? What have you been playing? We'll start with you, Derek.
Well, I've been playing a little bit of Black Future 88. It's a cool little roguelike synth punk game.
Synth punk?
Kind of think of yeah. They said it was like cyberpunk, but it was more like synth based because it does a lot with the music. A lot of the enemies are named after some of the 80s analog synthesizers, so it's pretty cool.
A big fan of synth, so
gotta listen to the game. It's great. But in between that, I've been back and forth in Street Fighter V and Garo Mark of the Wolves. That game was on sale, where they announced Terry for Smash. So definitely pick it up if you haven't. Beautiful 2D sprites. Yeah, just been trying to fight people online.
Did you get Mark of the Wolves on Switch, I'm assuming?
Yeah, I did.
Yeah.
Yeah,
such a
good
game.
Go ahead, sorry.
Such a good game.
It really is. It's actually like my first time playing it. I missed out on it back in the day. Was more of a Capcom fan than SNK.
Fair enough.
I've been trying to dig back in.
This is why I think this is going to be a fun podcast.
Right.
I think it's going to be a lot of fun because I went a little silent there for a second because I just looked up this game, Black Future 88, which, by the way, looks like a really fun Switch game on the eShop. So I'm definitely going to be checking this out after our recording. So thank you for bringing this to my attention because your description of a bit of synth punk elements, that sounds very interesting. And the screenshots look nice. I'm getting kind of aesthetically kind of like a Enter the Gungeon feel for this. And reviews I'm seeing online seem pretty good. Are you reviewing that for us right now, Derek?
I did. I think my review went live maybe Friday. I gave it 3.5. But I liked it. The only downfall I had in it was when I like roguelikes, the upgrade system, your character slowly starts getting better. But with this one, every time you level up, you actually unlock more things that you can find. So that's cool because you're always finding new guns, new upgrades, new curses and stuff, which are really cool. Like you can get powers, but they'll take away some of your health or they'll make your certain things weaker. But it was cool, but it wasn't what I was wanting. But yeah, no, it was definitely a good game worth checking out.
Yeah, I'll have to check out your review and then maybe pick it up. But there's literally a bajillion games on Switch right now I want to play, so might have to wait a little bit. But I'm always down for cyberpunk aesthetic stuff, so we'll see. I don't know.
Okay, so what have you been up to, Abram?
Well, I've been playing two things. One of them you've also been playing, Lachlan, so we're going to come back to that. The game I've been playing that you guys haven't, though, is unfortunately not a Switch game, not a Nintendo game, but I think that the Nintendo audience here at Nintendad should be paying attention to this if they have access to it, and that is Star Wars Jedi Fallen Order. Now, essentially, Jedi Fallen Order is a third-person action game set in Star Wars universe between Episode 3, Revenge of the Sith, and Episode 4, A New Hope, and you play as a young Jedi named Cal who survived Order 66, and now you're going around trying to rebuild the Jedi Order. And what I really liked about this game is the way that it so clearly wears all of its inspirations on its sleeve, chiefly being Metroid Prime, The Legend of Zelda, and From games. So I think the From games is least pertinent to our audience. Other than Dark Souls Remastered, there hasn't been too much From Software stuff on Nintendo consoles, but the combat is very deliberate, focusing a lot on parries, combos, where you're positioning yourself, and there's a real weight to all of it, and it feels great. And the sound design is excellent, so swinging the lightsaber feels awesome. Doesn't have the dismemberment for the stormtroopers and such that games like The Force Unleashed 2 have, so that's a little bit disappointing, but it is very good combat. But to speak to the Nintendo influences, first of all, the game is essentially structured like Metroid Prime is. You're going to different planets, and you have a 3D holomap, which basically, honestly, is just a map from Metroid Prime. And a lot of the exploration is itemized, so you're going to be finding upgrades, you're going to be finding new powers that are going to let you traverse the environments in new ways and access areas that you couldn't previously access, so there are a lot of Metroid Prime-like elements there. And there's also, which I didn't even realize before I started playing the game, essentially Zelda dungeons in here where you're going into these underground Zepho tombs and you are exploring them, and they all center around one key hook. Like I did one just last night that centers around using your force push ability to solve various puzzles and stuff. So it really just is an amalgamation of all these other awesome aspects and these other awesome franchises. And like I said on Twitter, frankly, even though Link's Awakening and Sekiro have come out this year and I've played both, I think that Jedi Fallen Order is the best Zelda game and the best From game I've played this year. So definitely, if you have access to it, and especially if you're a Star Wars fan, check this one out.
I'm real keen to check it out. I have to wait until Christmas, I think, unfortunately, but I'm really keen to get into it. There's so many games out lately.
That's the thing. It wasn't the greatest release window for this, and I feel like with it being an EA game, people kind of didn't give it the light of day, especially with it launching the same day as Pokemon. I know I didn't even get to it right at launch, but it's definitely worth checking out if you find a little bit of time.
All right.
That's something I've always wanted to, or not always, but like wanted to check out since I've heard, just really glad that, EA put out a full game and something that, gamers are actually happy about. I've been seeing nothing but, good stuff coming about the Fallen Order.
Yeah,
absolutely. It's a big 180 from the launch of Battlefront 2. I think actually EA deserves a little bit more credit because the way that Battlefront 2 has progressed since launch is very, very impressive. And I think, honestly, right now, for the price and the amount of content added, it's a great entry point. But I think Jedi Fallen Order just out of the gate is a big success from Respawn, big success from EA. And I think the type of games I was hoping for when they acquired the license. So it's too early to say, but it's definitely in contention for my personal game of the year, but there are so many other games that have come out that have been absolutely fantastic, so I don't know exactly how that'll shake out. So those are basically my thoughts about Fallen Order. I think as we record more of these, I'm going to have more thoughts as I get deeper into the game, but for now, those are my impressions, and they're very strong, very positive impressions, but that's it for me for right now for what I've been playing, although I'll come back a little bit later with Lachlan because we actually share a game in common, but before we get to that game, Lachlan, what else have you been playing?
Oh, I've been playing a bit of Mario Sonic at the Tokyo 2020 Olympic Games, and that game is probably the best Mario Party-like game on the Switch, considering Super Mario Party was a little bit of a disappointment. Its story mode isn't too great. It is a little... you kind of have to play it to unlock some extra mini-games, which are really fun to play, but the sports themselves are a lot of fun, especially with a bunch of people. At least a handful of them are a lot of fun. Games like the soccer or football for you UK and European listeners, that's pretty interesting. It's kind of a really stripped down version of like a old FIFA game, really old FIFA game. But it's just funny to see like Tails slide tackle Robotnik and then Mario just launch a ball into the net. It's like, it's so good. And then the Rugby Sevens is really fun. It's probably the most fun game out of all the mini games. It's just a really simple sort of rugby game, but you have some interesting depth to the tackling mechanics, and it has the most depth out of all the games put together, I think. It's just really nice. Some of the fighting games are a lot of fun, so like the boxing, it's kind of a little mashy. It's more or less you're just blocking and trying to parry punches to create openings to then launch your own offensive. And you got to pick whether you're blocking high or blocking low, or punching high and punching low to try and get around people's guards. That's a lot of fun. And it's really... actually felt a little awkward because I always play as Waluigi and I was fighting Peach, and when you do when you do a special combo, he just lays like 20 hits into her, just crack, and it's just like, oh, this is a little much. But yeah, and then the judo and the karate. The karate is a bit of fun. The judo is in part of a different set of mini games, which is like 2D graphics, which is using the 2D sprites from the NES era Mario games and the Mega Drive or Genesis era Sonic games. But a lot of those mini games in the 2D sprite things just boil down to mashing a button to run and then tapping another button to either jump, or sometimes just tapping a button to run, and that's it. they're not a lot of fun. And
Actually, speaking of a question I had about the game,
yeah.
so I haven't played one of these games in a long time, and one of the things that have turned me off from them is that it feels more like a minigame collection than a collection of different robust sports. Like how you were talking about the rugby and the soccer games, those sound a little bit more robust. Would you say that there's some actual meat to these games' bones, or do they feel more like Mario Party minigames?
Oh, so those ones, there is definitely a lot more meat there. So definitely the rugby 7, the soccer, and the boxing and the karate. Those ones have a lot of meat there. The rest of them, though, like the running, is just literally tapping the A button continuously to run to get to the end, and then the hurdles is just tapping and then hitting a button to jump, essentially. Most of the mini games break down to that. The equestrian actually is another one that has a lot of meat there. You're actually steering the horse around and jumping and whatnot. But to speak to how it's more like Mario Party, some of the mini games, you got the table tennis. And table tennis could be a lot of fun, running side to side the court, hitting the ball around. Except in Mario and Sonic, you don't control where you run to. It just runs automatically to the ball, and you're tapping the button to hit the ball and a direction to say what side of the court you want to hit the ball to. So it's just really simple, and just there's nothing there to that mini game. And yeah, a lot of the mini games feel a bit that way. All the shining lights are it's literally just a handful of games, but they kind of make the game fun.
Do you say it's more of a family experience then?
Oh, definitely more of a family experience.
Okay. Because my sister and I, we play a lot of Super Mario Party right now, and we throw in the other Mario sports games, but we have been looking for something to play, that we can pick up and play instead of a more campaign-based co-op experience. So maybe, do you think in that co-op setting, I don't know if you've gotten to play any multiplayer or not, is it fun in the way Mario Party is, or do you think it's something that you're going to come back to, or is it kind of one and done?
It's hard to say, because I think Mario Party, what gives Mario Party a lot more longevity is the board game aspect of it. Mario Sonic Olympic Games doesn't really have that. It's just you select the sports that you want to play. So you don't have that sort of overall board game experience, and then the mini games just kind of coming at you, and you're like, oh, I haven't played this one before, that's interesting. Or a favourite will come up and you'll all be like, yeah, alright, that's fun. You just don't have that sort of experience. You're like, oh, running, nah, I don't want to do that one, so I won't play that. And the rugby sevens is fun, I'll play that. And then eventually it seems that you're just playing about 20 games of rugby sevens over and over. Just because it's the most fun that you're having playing the game. You don't have that forced moment where you have to actually play other games. You can just choose freely, so that kind of kills it a little bit, I think. Apart from Mario and Sonic, I've also been playing Death Stranding, and that game is something. It's definitely something.
What chapter are you on?
I'm still in Chapter 3, and I'm about 25 hours in. Chapter 3 is massive. It's easily the biggest part of the game, apparently, and I'm definitely feeling it. It's huge. Surprisingly, I'm having a lot of fun with it, and for anyone who doesn't know what the game Death Stranding actually is, it's essentially just a delivery game. You just control Norman Reedus around, get packages, and then deliver them to wherever they want the packages delivered to. It's a game of fetch quests. But the main fun of the game is traversing to the areas you're going to. So I guess the whole point of the game is the walking from one point to another and mapping out your route to get there. So like you can go onto the map before you start doing a delivery, and you can go, okay, well, I want to go around this mountain area on the map, and you can mark out waypoints, and it'll mark on the map and in real life a line to the next waypoint, and you can set up like 15-20 waypoints to kind of navigate your way around through the environment. And then you got a whole bunch of other elements that end up making it absolute hell to get from one spot to the next. And I guess if you're into just management sims and just like managing inventories and everything, like just managing absolutely everything to the level of your shoes wearing out, so you have to manage your footwear, then that's a game that you'll probably enjoy. But if you don't like those sort of managing your inventory space or any of that stuff, then you are not going to have a good time playing Death Stranding whatsoever. There's a little bit of combat, but it's just kind of real basic, and it's not exactly fun. It's definitely not a Metal Gear experience. But yeah, I think that's kind of not the point of the combat's definitely not the point of the game.
I've been playing Death Stranding a little bit too, not to the extent you have. I think just based on the fact that I'm in Chapter 2 and I played maybe 5 hours of the game and you're 25 hours into it, clearly you got attached to it a little bit more. But personally, I'd say it's a game way more about the experience, the world, the story, the ambiance, the aesthetic that Kojima's created instead of the actual gameplay. I don't know if you would agree with that.
Oh, definitely. Definitely. The problem is you can't really talk about the story in a way that will make sense to anyone unless they play it, I guess. And there's so many elements. Yeah, there's so many elements to the story at the moment, and I'm 25 hours in, that I still have no idea about.
To that point, though, I think that the greatest strength of Death Stranding is that if it clicks with you, it's really going to click, because from a narrative perspective, but also to an extent from a gameplay perspective, this really is a new type of AAA experience. I think one thing you touched on with the traversal, but is very interesting, in my opinion, is the way that almost the game recontextualizes the player's relationship with space and with traversal, because it might sound mindless going from one point to another, especially when you can waypoint it and basically follow a line. But there's a very complex physics engine here, and unlike a game like Breath of the Wild, which also focuses a lot on traversal, the way your player interacts here is very different, way more grounded. You really have to think about every change in altitude, every rock you need to climb, because everything you do is going to take a toll on your character Sandbridge's body. So you really have to be actively engaged in the experience, and you gotta like management, but you also need to like very considered gameplay here, because for as basic as the gameplay loop is on paper, when you actually understand the way that you have to interface with the world, there is a surprising amount there. But I think, like Lachlan said, like I've kind of touched on, if you haven't developed a connection to the world, you're probably not going to want to keep playing.
Yeah, definitely. I feel the world itself is a character, and you just feel it. Like, just the world itself feels very deliberate as well. Like every placement of each rock, every hill, every valley is just so deliberately placed, and if you divert from the way that looks like the optimal path, you'll find it harder to get around to those places, but sometimes you'll be rewarded with like an amazing view, or that just looks like it was handcrafted for that spot. It's something. There are some really special moments in there. If you enjoy the gameplay, the problem is a lot of people will get turned off by the gameplay itself. I think the story is a lot of fun, nonsensical at times, and there are problems with the story as well. So they like to spell absolutely everything out. So they'll do a metaphor, and then they'll spell it out straight away. It's like at the moment you got the character called Deadman, and he's working with BBs, which are the little baby pods that attach to you and stuff, and they're born via what they call still mothers, so they're born from dead mothers, which is why they have a connection to... I'm getting way too in-depth here, but basically he works with some dead people and creations from those dead people, so he's called Deadman. You gather that because he speaks about what he does, you learn about what he does, but then he spells it out to you in an email, word for word. He's like, do you know why they call me Dead Man? It's because I do this. Get it? I work with dead things, and my name is Dead Man. It's like, oh, okay, thanks for that. And then in a later cutscene, he pretty much does the exact same thing, and I'm kind of going, you just sent me an email about this like 10 minutes ago. Why are you telling me in person now? But pretty much every character is like that. It's just they have to spell out it. If there's a metaphor, they need to not only do the metaphor, they need to then spell out the metaphor and just beat you over the head with it. It's like, I got it the first time. Just, you don't have to spell everything out for me. That can get a little tiresome. But overall, I'm really enjoying my time with it.
Cool. And there's actually one other thing I'd like to ask you about, and I think one thing that wasn't really played up in the marketing, but I think would appeal to a certain subset of gamers. Kojima brands this Death Stranding as being the first game in like a quote unquote Strand genre. Essentially, what that means is that there's no real time multiplayer, but other players can build structures, leave messages, and kind of trod paths into your version of the world that you then experience. You can kind of think about this in the context of, our audience. You can think about it in the context of maybe the Miiverse integration in some Wii U games, whether that was the bottles you'd find in Wind Waker HD or the little messages you would see in a Mario Maker level or on the map for 3D World, but in a much more forceful way. And I think it creates an interesting contrast with this very deliberate world Kojima created. Did you find these to be an additive thing to the gameplay experience, to your overall immersion, or did you think that they were a little bit out of place?
Eventually it felt additive. I felt it a bit intrusive to begin with, just because you don't get access to other people's structures in your game until you go to do a delivery in that area, essentially, and then you put that area into what they call the chiral network, which is essentially the super internet, and then that gives you access to other people's structures built in the world. And that felt really off, because I'm like, oh, I just walked past that place and all of a sudden there's a structure there, and I was there like 5 minutes ago, and why is there a structure there now? Once I got more into the game, once I got more into chapter 3, I felt that I just got into the game loop of it, so the gameplay aspect of why that happens just took over more so than me being like, oh, that wasn't there a second ago. It just, eventually you just got into it, and eventually it does give you structures, like you can build roads, and basically you got these sort of structures that you walk to, and you bring metals and other things that you can put into it to build these roads. Essentially you need multiple people to be putting materials into these roads to get them built, so it feels like you are all building structures together more so than you're building a structure that is going to help other people out. And that felt really cool. So like when you're building highways that stretch all the way across the map, it just felt really, really cool.
Wonder how that's going to work for like the future, like for when, because I'm going to play this game hopefully next month. Me and a friend are going to like try this marathon it, since we're both like on the fence about it. But how is that going to change, like, in the future, like, if someone picks this game up, say 2 years later, is there a way that they can experience the world without all those structures? Or like when, they get it to where it's connected to the network and all of a sudden, boom, everything is just built?
They have an interesting way around that, because there's rain. The rain in the world is called timefall, and essentially anything that the rain touches ages rapidly. So the structures that are built in the world, when the rain hits it, it degrades it. So over time, those structures start to degrade, and then eventually they will break down and disappear. So yeah, eventually all these structures that people have built, if they don't come and repair them all the time, or if other people don't bring materials to repair these structures, then eventually they will disappear.
It's really interesting. I feel like my interest is more piqued in it now, just knowing that.
Yeah, it's actually, yeah, it is a really interesting part of the game, one that I definitely take for granted, which is why I didn't bring it up initially. It's just it feels so much a part of the game now that it doesn't feel out of place. And yeah, there'll be structures that I've used in the past that are just not there anymore because they've broken down and they're gone, which means that a route that I took once, I then have to either build the structures that were there that helped me get there or take another path, and that can create some interesting, like, different gameplay aspects to it as well, like change up what I'm doing constantly.
It's a game I really think that you need to experience firsthand to totally understand. There's this Spielberg quote I really like about film that says, essentially, this is, horribly butchering the quote, but essentially, every movie plot you can boil down to like one of 7 different stories. And I think that concept is even more obvious in games, because when you're actually interfacing with games, you see how they work much quicker, and it's harder to hide things from the player. And while you can look at Death Stranding and you can play it for a minute and sort of see various aspects from different genres and other series and where inspirations came from, you really do need to play this game to understand how fresh it is, because it truly is a game that I think deserves a lot of credit for being in the AAA space something genuinely different and new. Regardless of if you think that's different and new in a fun way or kind of different and new in a pretentious Kojima way, I think that it's definitely a moment in gaming history that we're going to remember and look back on as something that, if nothing else, tried to be more, tried to be something different. So even though I'm kind of done with it, I think I might give it another shot. It's a game that I really respect and think deserves a lot of credit this year.
Yeah, for sure. It's crazy that this has come out from a sort of AAA sort of level studio or developer, I guess. It's crazy. Like, what other studio would allow this to happen? Like, I can't see EA or Ubisoft or even Nintendo putting something like this out there. It's just so pretentious is definitely a good word for it. Apparently, it was Kojima said that essentially when he pitched the game to his studio, nobody was most people were not on board. They were just like, that sounds ridiculous. But after they started working on the game, they started to get into it and get into the idea of it. So I thought that was interesting because on paper, hearing what this game is just does not do it justice at all. And trying to explain it like this, I'm trying to explain it and I just can't really put it into words because I need to describe one thing, you have to then describe a mechanic, which then that mechanic ties into the story, and that's just then to explain the story would make no sense unless you explain more stories. So that's just makes everything really difficult to talk about.
Definitely stands in contrast to the next game we're going to talk about.
Definitely, which I guess we'll jump into that one now. Actually, so I've been playing Pokemon Sword and Shield. Which version have you been playing?
So I've been playing Sword.
Okay. I've been jumping between Sword and Shield because I got Shield for review, which I'm reviewing for Nintendad. But Sword, I have been lent by a friend so I can gather a bunch of the Pokemon in it and trade it across. And he's borrowing my account that has Shield on it so he can do the same. So we're just kind of trying to help each other out with being able to get all the Pokemon without actually being there because we play on different schedules. But yeah, it's so much fun. I've been having a ball with it. The game does have its issues, but it's a Pokemon game and it's delightful.
I think saying it's a Pokemon game basically sums up my thoughts on Sword so far. So keep in mind, I am only about 3 hours into the game. I got it, and I've just been very busy with college life, and I've been playing Jedi Fallen Order, and I've kind of put Pokemon on the back burner intentionally because I am off for my Thanksgiving break in a couple days, and I'm going to be away with family, so that's when I'm really going to sink my teeth into Sword. But what I've played so far feels like Pokemon I've played in the past, and I love Pokemon. I would say it is one of my favorite game franchises, period. And so I have been very, very pleasantly surprised by the ways in which Sword and Shield feel very familiar, but at the same time seem to be advancing the series in interesting ways, whether it is with the wild area, the more streamlined aspects of the game, whether that's the storytelling, trying to be a little bit more ambitious, or other various facets. I think that there's a lot to like here, and if you like Pokemon, you're really going to like this game. And as I really like Pokemon, I definitely anticipate my feelings for this game getting warmer and warmer the more I play. But from my early hours, all I can say is it is Pokemon, and if you like that, you're going to like this game.
I'm curious, have you gotten up to the wild area yet at 3 hours?
Yes, I have. So I just did the first rival battle with Bede when you're in the mine. And the
Okay.
wild... Yeah, so I'm getting towards the first gym. I've really been taking my time because one thing I really want to praise the game for, even in these early hours, is the variety of Pokemon already. Not only in the wild area, but in the routes. There are so many different new Pokemon and familiar old faces to see. And there's a certain novelty in that. And it's just been a fun experience. And to your point asking about the wild area, I do think that, especially in the post-game, when I dive more into that, it is definitely something that pushes the series forward, but also feels a little bit like a prototype. I kind of liken this to Twilight Princess's Hyrule Field. At least in my first rush in to the wild area, it felt fairly open, fairly empty, but I like the concept behind it, and I'm excited to explore it more, but it does feel a little bit like Game Freak trying their hand for the first time at something. Does it open up at all the more I play?
I think that it is deceptively bigger than it looks on the onset, because it looks like it's just between those first two towns. It's just between the train station and that Motorstoke town. But it actually, if you turn right at Motorstoke, it goes off to the side and then goes up again to another town. So there's a whole massive other area, but that opens up, like, that it gates you off there by the level of the Pokemon in that area. So they're around like level 27 to 32 ish on the way up there, and then eventually if you can get into areas where they're up in the 50s, and so it kind of stops you from getting to the next town that way. And also, if you haven't got the first 3 gym badges, they won't let you in the door. But yeah, that okay. The wild area definitely opens up, so it's bigger out that side than it is in that initial area when you walk into. It's a lot of fun, I think, but also it kind of feels like I'm almost where I'm at, because I'm about 19-20 hours in. I feel like I'm almost over leveled for it already. I think the highest level Pokemon I've seen in that area so far has been level 60. And so I'm hitting level 50 at the moment, so it's a bit like, once I get to level 60, am I going to come back here, or am I going to go to more of the late game area spots that have the higher level Pokemon? But it does feel really cool, really fresh for a Pokemon game, that's for sure.
No, the more I see online, the more I talk to people like you who have played more of the game, the more I am excited to get deeper into it, because I really do love Pokemon. And for as many issues as I do have with this game, whether it's being no national dex or the fact that it's not really on par technically with other games on Switch, the core heart and the core magic of Pokemon really is here, and there are very smart changes that have been made to the formula and some very interesting new Pokemon, new mechanics that I want to experience more of. So hopefully by when we record next, I'm personally going to have much more robust thoughts in the game. But as of right now, for me, it feels like Pokemon, and I love Pokemon, so I'm excited to play more. But in the early hours, I'm not totally seeing how this is the next step forward for the series. But at the same time, I don't really need that. I just need a great region, which we have, with great characters, which I think we have, and great new Pokemon, which we definitely have. So I'm excited.
Yeah, I'm finding it so much fun. It's definitely, I feel like there is a lot more room for improvement, but this is kind of, apart from Let's Go, it's their first real proper Switch sort of version of Pokemon, so I wasn't really expecting massive innovation from them, at least at this stage. And I mean, they haven't really been known for doing massive innovations. It's always been small upgrades, I guess. But there are definitely a lot of things that I really like about this game, like not having to deal with HMs anymore is absolute. It is just great. You can just, if you want to fly to a different area, you don't have to have a Pokemon with fly. You just open up your map, click on the Pokestop you want to go to, and you'll just fast travel there. If you want to travel on water instead of having surf, you just get on your bike and just ride the bike into the water, and away you go once you get the upgrade. And yeah, it's there's a lot of smart little things in there that, you know, you don't end up wasting moves on Pokemon. You can just concentrate on the battles with your Pokemon, and traversing the world is its own separate thing now. I just really like those little upgrades. And also the music. The music is ridiculous, and I love it. It's so much slap bass in almost, I reckon half the tracks have slap bass and crazy synth, and I'm all for it.
I'm curious, actually, while we're talking about Pokemon, Derek, are you a Pokemon guy? Are you planning on playing these games?
I'm actually not that big of a Pokemon fan. The most exposure I have to Pokemon is through Smash. I have Let's Go Pikachu, and I've played it for about 3 to 4 hours, and I like it. I may eventually pick up Sword or Shield. I don't really have one towards, but I missed out on the Pokemon train, and I just never jumped on. I've always liked the idea of it. It seems like it should be something up my alley, because I love RPGs. I love, catching monsters and stuff like that, like in action RPGs where you have, like, like elementals and stuff like that go along with you. So it seems like it should be something up my alley, but I've just never sunk its teeth into me.
That makes total sense, and I think that if Nintendo and third parties and indies decide to take a collective breath and stop releasing games for a little bit because this Switch release count is crazy, I would definitely recommend checking out Sword and Shield because I do think these are good entry points into the series. A lot of the issues I feel that people have with these games come from a perspective of having all of this context of past Pokemon games and the history of Game Freak and the development troubles behind the scenes. I think if you're coming to Sword and Shield fresh or having just played a little bit of Let's Go, I think this is going to be a very fresh and fun experience. But at the same time, I don't think again, in my early hours, it is so essential that you have to run out and play it right now.
Okay. One thing that I actually liked when everyone was in uproar about, the decks being different and not having access to all, 700, 800, Pokemon from all the past games. I definitely thought it was kind of nice. I was like, oh, hey, I can, actually catch them all.
It's a deliberately pared back experience in some regards that I think does tailor itself to a more, I don't want to say casual, but just a fresher audience, someone who hasn't really experienced the Pokemon games before. Because Let's Go, for as much as I did enjoy those games, definitely were casual and watered down. Yeah. These feel like a much more robust entry point for people who, are totally capable of playing Pokemon, but just haven't jumped into it yet. I think Let's Go is a great entry point for maybe a younger audience or an audience that's not familiar with RPGs. But if you have, the chops to play Pokemon, which honestly, it's not that high of a bar in the first place. It's a very accessible series. I think this is a series and a good place to jump into the series with Sword and Shield. So, like I said, it's got a lot of merits for the new player and for the returning player. So I'd say give it a shot.
Yeah, I 100% agree because I'm a sort of a lapsed Pokemon fan. I loved the first two gens and then I kind of fell off. And I've dipped in here and there. Like I bought Platinum, played that for most of the game and then fell off after the 7th gym. And then I jumped into Sun and kind of fell off that pretty quick. But with Sword and Shield, I've just been playing it every chance that I can get. It's given me back the joy that I had when I first played the series, I guess. There's just a lot of nice sort of quality of life things in there, and the music, again, have to always mention that music. And I don't know, it's just, there's something about this game that's fun. As much as it has a lot of problems, it's also just plain fun.
There's something to the magic of Pokemon. I mean, and I love that we're all coming from it from different perspectives because I am the quintessential hardcore Pokemon fan. I've played thousands of hours across the entire series. I've played every gen. I've got a complete national dex in Pokemon Y. I've got Pokemon cards spilling out of my closet. I love the series, and I love that it's bringing lapsed fans like you, Lachlan, back into the series. And unfortunately, right now, the fact I've only played 3 hours really is a victim of the fact that I'm a college student now and I don't have all the time that I used to have. And when I get that vacation, I'm really going to be diving into this game. But right now, Jedi Fallen Order, with what little free time I do have around my real-world responsibilities and such, that's kind of taken its place because, my love of Star Wars trumps my love of basically any other multimedia franchise and basically my love of anything other than my girlfriend. Priorities, you gotta have them. But, Pokemon, I'm gonna get to it very soon, and I'm very excited to do so.
So let's lead into our topics of today's show. The first one will be based on IGN personality Brian Altano's new album. Yeah, for some people who don't know, he makes music. He makes his own music and whatnot, and he's releasing a new album, or is it out yet? I don't know the release date on that.
Just came out on Friday.
Just came out on Friday, okay. So yeah, his latest album is called Revangelion. It's a remix album of Neon Genesis Evangelion tracks, or tracks based on Evangelion. And yeah, we've all been listening to it, and I'm a massive Neon Genesis fan, so immediately was enjoying the album, enjoying the way he incorporated elements of the series, sounds, the music from the series into the album itself, and also his different takes on different characters and elements and areas of the series that of his own created music stuff. What did you guys think of it?
Personally, I'd never watched any Evangelion. I'd heard of it, just never really got much into mech anime, and so I decided to watch a few episodes of it first before listening to it. Man, I'm hooked now. I've watched like 7 episodes of it since, and I just think the album is spot on. Like it's great. Understand why he chose some of the songs he did, and why he chose to like make some of the songs feel darker than they actually are in the show, just to like mirror that like darkness. Because that show, I was not expecting it to be as heavy as it is. Like, holy crap, it's heavy.
Oh yeah, it's easy to think that it's just another mech anime, but it's really not focused on the mechs.
Yeah, not at all.
But personally, I came into this album from the perspective of a non-anime fan. I have friends who I've heard yell about this show quite a bit, whether positively or negatively. Apparently there's some kind of ending controversy in a movie that ties into it. The point is, whenever my friends start talking about this show, I turn my ears off because I don't get it. I'm not an anime guy. But I will say, I was very, very much surprised by how much I enjoyed Brian Altano's work on this album. I think all of the remixes are just great pieces of instrumental cyberpunk music. I love that aesthetic. I love Blade Runner. I love, Astral Chain, all of these really fun cyberpunk worlds, and I think that the music really captures them. And just from a more technical perspective, I think the mixes are really good. I think Brian Altano really understands music and how to compose it. So I enjoyed how it sounded quite a bit, even without the context of the show. And when I'm doing my homework, when I'm studying, I like to listen to remixed instrumental Nintendo music, and I could honestly really see myself turning this album on and throwing it into my mix also, because I think a lot of tracks were really great and just very relaxing and very evocative. So I have to say, as a non-fan, there's a lot of merit here, even if, you're not familiar with the show.
No, I totally agree with that.
So yeah, Brian Altano's album, I guess we're all giving it a thumbs up.
Definitely.
Alright, so our next topic, we're going to talk about a little bit about the Game Awards for 2019, do just some light predictions. So we'll just do a Game of the Year prediction and then a prediction of what categories Nintendo might win out of the categories they're nominated in, and then maybe an announcement prediction from each of us. So we'll jump in and give that a shot. So Game of the Year. The nominees for Game of the Year this year will be Control, Death Stranding, Super Smash Bros. Ultimate, Resident Evil 2, Sekiro Shadows Die Twice, and The Outer Worlds. So I'm curious, what game do you guys think will win that category, Game of the Year?
I think Game of the Year is such a weird category because depending on what you mean, I think the answer is evident in a couple different ways. If you want to talk about the game that controlled the conversation the most, and I feel is the game of 2019, I think it is Death Stranding. But if you want to talk from a quality standpoint, I think that Resident Evil 2, Sekiro, and Smash Brothers are all up there. Of course, of those games, my favorite easily Super Smash Bros. Ultimate. Keep in mind, I haven't played The Outer Worlds or Control. Control, I'd really like to play. Outer Worlds, not really my thing. But I personally have issues saying the game of 2019 is Super Smash Bros. Ultimate, even if that is how the Game Awards has their parameters and kind of counts things from the very tail end of the previous year as being part of this year. I don't know, it feels kind of disingenuous for me personally to say my Game of the Year is a game from last year. A couple of things I'd like to see on here, Fire Emblem and otherwise, but of these games, I think that Death Stranding and Resident Evil 2 really are the big ones in contention for it.
Definitely have to agree with you, Abram. I think Death Stranding has a chance of winning just because of the bromance between Kojima and Jeff Keighley. I mean, it's just obvious, they have such admiration for each other. When Kojima was removed from Konami, I think it was at the Game Awards, Jeff Keighley, basically made a statement about how he did not like their business practice of not letting Kojima appear. So I definitely think, if he has anything to say in this, Death Stranding's probably going to win. But if we go at it from the sales perspective, I think Smash Brothers is going to win because I feel like out of all these games, from a dollar standpoint, it's raked in the most money.
I think just from a perspective of it being a community game, I think that the viewer vote goes to Smash easy because I think Smash is just such it's such a moment in gaming history, and it's one of those things that continues into the year. For as much as it is a 2018 game, and I'll always consider it a 2018 game, even though it was late December, the game really has dominated a lot of the Nintendo-centric conversation with all the DLC characters and new modes and everything. So I do think it has had a large 2019 presence, and I think that the fans are probably going to landslide that to victory. But I don't know, I still personally have issue with calling that the game of 2019, even though, as I'll reiterate, it is such a badass game and easily one of my favorites, if not my favorite Switch game. So that's a tricky one for me.
I agree that the parameters for Game of the Year is just... I feel like they should have the Game Awards and like sort of as a New Year's celebration almost. So set it at like January 1st. Everyone's on holiday at the time. It'd be a nice sort of post hangover from New Year's Eve sort of show. And it would also set up that, well, the Game Awards would literally be all the games from the previous year. It would just, I feel, would make a lot more sense than having like Smash Bros. Ultimate come in a year late and win categories or potentially not get votes because people haven't thought about the game for a year. So whereas you've got games like Control and Death Stranding and The Outer Worlds that only came out a couple of months ago, they're so fresh in your mind and you remember your first experience playing those games. Whereas Smash Bros is so far behind. It's like, well, do you remember how you felt playing that game? I've long forgotten how I felt when I first played it. I know I still love it, but I'd feel more attached to these other games that I've played. And that said, I think that for me personally, Resident Evil 2 would be my favourite game of this year, with Death Stranding potentially taking it, but I haven't played enough Death Stranding. Even though I'm 25 hours in, I still haven't played anywhere near enough to take that over anything at the moment. But yeah, so I think Resident Evil 2 has a real shot of winning. Though I also feel weird about giving it to a remake because of how much that game's been remade. It feels a bit... I feel a little better about it.
I think the conversation around Resident Evil 2 being Game of the Year or being disqualified for being a remake is made a little bit invalid by the fact that when you put the original Resident Evil 2 side by side with Resident Evil 2 Remake, they are so different. I mean, this really is a fundamentally new way to play Resident Evil and a coagulation of all the different types of Resident Evil, and I really love that game. I'm not a Resident Evil guy. Actually, 2 Remake was my first game in the series, so I dug it a lot. And I totally think it's valid to have this be the Game of the Year, and it's really deserving. I mean, Capcom had a badass year between this, Devil May Cry 5, Monster Hunter Iceborne. They're really on top of their game this year. Of course, me personally, I kind of still get to go half in a corner that my personal Game of the Year as of right now, Fire Emblem Three Houses, is not nominated, but, you know.
Yeah, I'm a little bummed that Fire Emblem didn't get a shout here, but also it is a bit of a niche game, I guess, even though it had its best sales of a Fire Emblem game, I believe. It still is a little bit niche, weirdly enough.
And that's part of the problem I have with the Game Awards. It's definitely a biased show in the perspective of Western games, which is fine, but I think that also contextualizes this because, for instance, Smash Brothers, you know, has the resonance with a Western audience and this really mainstream gaming audience that a Breath of the Wild did and an Odyssey did, like how those got nominated back in 2017. But I think the real successes from Nintendo this year are their smaller titles, not necessarily the niche ones. Like, I wouldn't call Luigi's Mansion 3 particularly niche, but that is an excellent, excellent game. And Fire Emblem definitely does speak to a niche audience, but it also speaks to just Nintendo's success with so many different franchises and how versatile their IP catalog is. So I really would have liked to see a nomination, but I totally get why it isn't there. It's just disappointing because I think that game is absolutely phenomenal.
Alright, so jumping into our next section, we'll just talk about a bunch of the categories that Nintendo is currently in the running for and whether we think they'll win it. So best family game, I think it's safe to say that they will likely win based on what's in that category. Once I run through the list, you'll understand. So we got Luigi's Mansion 3, Ring Fit Adventure, Super Mario Maker 2, Super Smash Bros. Ultimate, and Yoshi's Crafted World. I think it's safe to say...
Full house there.
Yeah, I think Nintendo's got a good shot. But is there any there that stand out that you think will... that either of you think will win it, or just you think it's pretty up for grabs?
Well, for me is I come at it from a biased perspective because personally I'd like to see Luigi's Mansion 3 take home an award because I think it is the best game there from 2019. Of course, this is where it gets tricky again because Super Smash Bros. Ultimate I do think is a better game than Luigi's Mansion 3, but purely from a 2019 perspective, I think Luigi's Mansion 3 is easily the best game Nintendo published, even if I personally prefer Fire Emblem to it. It's just such a polished and immersive, evocative game that I absolutely loved. But I think from the perspective of a family game, Super Mario Maker 2 really does deserve a nod, if not the win, for the ways it advanced the series in terms of the new playstyles, new pieces, but also the co-op. I think that is a big thing in a family game because when I play games with, my younger sister, it's really important that it's an experience that we can share simultaneously and when we can share that we both can have fun with regardless of skill level. And I think that Mario Maker 2 really does fit that. There's just such an inherent goofy fun to playing 2D Mario with a friend and falling down pits and trying to help each other over gaps. So I think that logically and most deservingly, Mario Maker 2 should get the award for the category, but the best game in that list that came out this year, I think, is Luigi's Mansion 3, so I'd like to see that one.
I definitely think that we have a possibility of seeing Smash Ultimate just get a sweep in this category, even though I definitely agree Luigi's Mansion 3 is a fantastic game, and Mario Maker 2 also fantastic. That's one of the things like I've actually played with some of my coworkers at work. We were doing some team building activities. We had some time where we were like just playing Mario Maker levels and building levels together. And people that didn't necessarily play games, it's something they could get into. But I just see Smash Brothers just where, as you were saying earlier, Abram, it's been just dominating the Nintendo conversation this year. I definitely see it as being something that could win the best family game.
Yeah, I personally think like Luigi's Mansion 3 should win it. I've been a massive Luigi's Mansion fan since the GameCube. I absolutely love that game, and that game kind of got crapped on when it came out so much just because it didn't have Mario in it. But I just feel that Super Mario Maker 2 will likely win it just because 2D Mario games tend to win everything. Okay, so the other categories that Nintendo have nominated for is Best Art Direction, Best Score and Music, Best Action Game, Best Action Adventure Game, Best Fighting Game, Best Strategy Game, and Best Multiplayer. Out of all of those, which categories do you think Nintendo has a chance? We'll start with Abram.
Here's why this year is hard for me. As a diehard Nintendo fan, I think that this is probably one of the best years Nintendo's had in a long time. I don't think it tops 2017. I thought it had a shot to, but with the delay of Animal Crossing, I think it kind of missed having the overall impact that 2017 did. But what's interesting about this year, and I was talking to one of my friends about it, earlier in the year, who loves Nintendo but is less of a hardcore fan of the company and all of its different IP. This is the year where we saw the B-tier Nintendo franchises come back and flourish. We had, of course, these really excellent tentpoles come back in the forms of Mario and Zelda, but not core 3D Mario and core 3D Zelda. We got Mario Maker 2 and Link's Awakening. Mario Maker 2 I really enjoy, and I still enjoy. Link's Awakening is a game that I played through and had fun with, but I don't think is that memorable of an experience in the long run. But the real successes of this year for Nintendo, Three Houses, Luigi's Mansion 3, these smaller experiences, getting Astral Chain back, Yoshi's Crafted World, which I think is an excellent game. These are all great experiences, but the problem is they don't resonate with the Western gamer, the mainstream AAA gamer, the way that they resonate with the Nintendo community. When you're really ingrained in the community the way that I am and you guys are, and the way that our audience is, you see all these games that are worthy of winning awards. But unfortunately, in the context of larger industry, in the context of what the Game Awards is, who votes, and what have you, I don't think Nintendo's going to pick up that many awards this year. I think it's a year with a lot of excellent games from other studios that unfortunately appeal more to the demographic that's voting. So I think Nintendo is just in a position where, for their audience, they really, really delivered. And I had an excellent time being a Nintendo fan this year. But from the perspective of Game Awards, I don't think that they're going to pick up that many awards, unfortunately. So I have to say, unfortunately, my prediction would be, obviously, they take Family Game of the Year. That's the free spot on the bingo board. And I think that Smash Brothers is in contention for Game of the Year, even though I don't think it'll win it. But these other categories, I gotta say, unfortunately, I'm not too confident in many of them, if any.
All right. For me, I think they have a chance of getting at least two, not counting best family game. I think best strategy game,
Yeah.
just because out of all of those, I've heard of a few of them. I've heard of what is it, Tropico, and I've heard of Wargroove, which I actually really wanted to play Wargroove because of its similarities to Advance Wars. But I think Fire Emblem, with how big that has gotten, I think that has a real chance of winning. And then best fighting game, where Smash Brothers has been such a huge success. I think it'll definitely trump it. The only other game that I think could win best fighting game would be Mortal Kombat 11, as NetherRealm and WB have come out and said, it's the best-selling Mortal Kombat game like ever. Though, I mean, as niche as Dead or Alive is, and as niche as Jump Force, and as niche as Sam Show is, you have the two probably like biggest mainstream fighting games other than Street Fighter in Smash Brothers and Mortal Kombat. So I think there's a 50-50 chance that Smash could get that fighting game.
That's actually a great point, and I had totally blanked on strategy game. I don't know why, considering Fire Emblem Three Houses is my game of the year right now. I probably should have remembered that it was up for strategy game. I don't think it has very stiff competition there. So if they win anywhere, I do think they win there. Again, though, I think that with fighting game, I think it goes to Mortal Kombat personally, just because Smash Brothers is in this weird space between spaces where it's a game everyone loves, it's a game I love, but at the same time, when the voters, the panel is voting, not talking about the audience perspective, because I think Smash probably takes that. From the perspective of the panelists, I think it might be difficult for them, and I'll be curious to see, if Smash wins anything, because it's such a triumph of game design and such a moment for the community, but at the same time, it is a 2018 game, and I think that Smash really is going to trip over its own feet in that regard, just by the fact that how the Game Awards are structured doesn't really put Smash Brothers at the best position to win awards.
I can agree that, and I definitely think maybe with the history of, since last year's Game Awards, Mortal Kombat 11 was announced, so it just seems only fair that this year, 1 year later, they would nominate it as best fighting game, because it seems like in terms of best graphics, best accessibility in a fighting game, like a standard 2D fighting game, it would definitely win. So I could definitely see MK11 taking it.
I think 2019's Game Awards are really going to show how much politicking goes on with these, because the Game Awards are in a weird position now where they're quasi, awards show, quasi press conference. It just has its hand in so many different baskets that I'm going to be interested to see how this all shakes out. And I will say quickly, I don't think a lot of the accusations leveled at Jeff Keighley for being biased, having Death Stranding nominated, or having some games announced, I don't think those are necessarily fair, but I do think that the Game Awards inherently invites itself to have these kinds of controversies, so I'm going to be super, super curious as to what wins.
I personally think that strategy game and fighting game are the only two categories that they have a shot at. The only reason I think fighting game that Smash could beat Mortal Kombat is because Mortal Kombat had quite a lot of controversy coming out at the start with their microtransactions and the way that the crypt was handled, in that it was a mess. A lot of that game was a mess, and you had to basically spend money to get a bunch of stuff and or grind for days to get things, and that had a massive impact at the launch of that game. And they didn't fix it for quite a while. It was like that for a good month. I know I reviewed it for Switch Player magazine, and the Switch version it took 4 weeks for it to bring out an update to fix what they said that they were going to fix, and it didn't really do much. And a lot of the people who said that the patch came out earlier for the other versions, that also didn't really fix too much, and it was a while before it eventually got its feet. So I think that could hurt it, and that would give Smash a good chance to win fighting game, because I don't think the other games apart from Mortal Kombat are really going to have an impact on that voting of that category. If we wanted to throw in Untitled Goose Game as well, then I think it has a shot at winning Best Independent Game.
I totally agree with that. Like, that's one I still want to pick up, just because it just looks so freaking charming.
Yeah, considering the sales it got and the memes that sprouted from it and the amount of traction that game got, I think that it has a shot. Though, yeah, I'm not going to count that as a Nintendo win necessarily. I'm going to count that as an Australian independent game win. So, being Australian, I would be happy for them to win something, especially considering they're from close to home, it being based in Melbourne, which is close to where I'm from.
Thing for Untitled Goose Game is it's going up against Outer Wilds, which people absolutely adore. That's another one that I haven't gotten to play yet. Outer Wilds and Control are really the two games I felt that I really missed out on this year. So I want to play those. I did play Untitled Goose Game. I thought it was alright. I ended up being way more intrigued by the concept than I was by the execution. So I think that there's a shot there, but I think Outer Wilds probably takes that category. Baba Is You, though, I heard is absolutely phenomenal. I haven't played it. It's not necessarily my type of game. I could see that taking it, and I believe that's another Switch and Steam game. So again, that'd be kind of a win for Nintendo from the console perspective if we're talking about exclusivity. But I think that it was just a really strong year for Nintendo, but not necessarily a year that reaps awards, which I don't think is necessarily a bad thing.
I think that's Nintendo full stop, though. They've been nominated for in the Game Awards quite a bit, and I don't think they've won very many at all. Or they just get snubbed completely in categories. And that's just, yeah, as you've said earlier, it definitely speaks to the audience. Hey, so we'll jump in and do some announcement predictions, considering that the Game Awards has really become a hotbed of announcements in recent years. So yeah, we'll start with you, Abram. What announcement prediction do you have?
I have two. One is Nintendo focused, and one isn't. I'm going to do the Nintendo focused one last, and I'm going to start off with the non-Nintendo one, which is I think that I can't remember exactly the name, but this game basically exists. It's been confirmed by so many different leakers, but it's the next Batman Arkham game. I think it's called Arkham Legacy, but don't quote me on that. Essentially, we've been waiting so long for an Arkham game, and it's been teased by WB Montreal so much, and so many different leakers are like, yeah, this game's real. I think Game Awards is a natural place to announce it. We thought it would be State of Play, we thought it would be Inside Xbox, it's been nothing, and I think Game Awards makes sense for that game. I'm an enormous DC fan, so this is right up my alley. Arkham games are great, and I really hope that this comes to fruition soon. And word on the street is it might be Court of Owls themed, and as a huge Batman fan, if you know who the Court of Owls are, that would be absolutely badass. So I think that the Game Awards makes sense to announce this game at, but my Nintendo prediction is a little bit crazier. It's not nearly as safe, although it is also something that has been rumored in the past, although those rumors tend to be false. I think that this is Metroid's time to shine. Here's what I envision happening. I envision a Bayonetta 3 type moment where we see some kind of stinger for Metroid Prime 4, a little cinematic of some variety. No gameplay here. I think that that's an E3 2020 blowout. But then I think we see an announcement for, kind of like how we got Bayonetta 1 and 2 on Switch, for Metroid Prime 1, 2, 3 on Switch in a trilogy collection of some sort. I just think it makes way too much sense, and if we think about, again, audience, Retro Studios is one of Nintendo's few Western teams, and Metroid, and just by merit of it being a first-person exploration game, these are all things that resonate really well with this Western audience. So I think that if you're going to put a Nintendo game in front of such a big crowd, I think you make it Metroid. I could see a Smash character announcement happening, it probably will happen, but again, I think that you gotta play to what you have, and Smash character announcements are going to resonate anywhere. But this is a unique moment to speak to an audience that doesn't necessarily watch your directs all the time, so I think you put Metroid Prime out here because I think that Nintendo is going to, as it rightfully should, position Metroid Prime 4 as a big system-selling, mature exclusive, and this is a place to announce it more properly.
All right. My prediction, I've got two, also one Nintendo-based, one not. Both of them are not going to happen, but I do have reasoning behind it. The first, the non-Nintendo one. Last year, we got Marvel Ultimate Alliance 3 announced for Nintendo. No one saw that coming. Out of nowhere. Crazy. I'm thinking that Marvel Games might announce something that people in the fighting game community have been wanting, and that is a rebranded Marvel vs. Capcom game, or maybe even some kind of a collection. of like the older games. We see that Marvel and Capcom are working together with the arcade one-up, with the X-Men, Children of the Atom, Marvel Superheroes, and the Punisher. I think it's very possible that they release a collection of some of these old games. Capcom loves releasing collections of old games, and Switch gets a lot of those collections. So I definitely think that's something that we could see, and just to get people hyped for that. My next prediction is Smash Brothers, but I think we're going to see something crazy. I think we are going to see something that makes no sense, and I think we're going to see Master Chief. Not even joking, saying this with a straight face. I think that the way Microsoft and Nintendo have been so buddy-buddy, and the fact that, even Sakurai was like, hey, go play Banjo-Kazooie on Xbox after he was, doing his show of Banjo for Smash. I think the game industry eventually is just going to see Smash Brothers as this is just like a celebration of gaming history. I think there was a story a few days ago that came out that in Japan they were doing like a Smash Brothers tournament, and that Sony Entertainment was taking part of this tournament. I don't know if anything ever came out about that, or if they were just doing that to be friendly. But I definitely see something crazy like that happening. An actual real Xbox representative.
Oh, I actually don't think either of those things are that unlikely. I think that the less likely one is the collection of Marvel vs. Capcom games, which, in the grand scheme of things, again, is possible. But I think that that Master Chief in Smash actually is fairly likely, because there have been pretty strong rumors over the years that have been told by various people, namely, I heard them from Colin Moriarty on his PlayStation show, but other people as well, that Phil Spencer and Microsoft really have been trying to get Halo into more places. There were talks at one point, allegedly, about bringing Master Chief Collection to PS4, and considering how closely Nintendo and Microsoft have been working together, I could see older Halo games coming to Switch, and I could see Master Chief getting into Smash. I think that we're at a point now where nothing is out of the equation for Smash. Whether or not Microsoft will get 2 reps in the Fighter Pass, I think is a bigger question than whether or not Master Chief gets in at all. But I think that actually your 2 unlikely predictions are possible, just, not in the realm of likelihood as the Arkham game, which has basically been confirmed by a bajillion different people.
I agree with that.
Alright, so I didn't really have any real predictions, but I will just throw some out, I guess. I just wanted to wing it, see what happened. And I think that Resident Evil 3 remake possibly just getting a nod out there, because considering how strong the Western sales were. I don't know why, but I know we know that game's in development. We know that it's close, and we know that it's tracking for 2020. I don't know, based on when Capcom tends to release games, that we will see it at E3 at all. It will probably be before. It will probably come out before. So I'm just taking a stab that if it's coming out earlier, that there needs to be an announcement early. So I don't really know.
I think that's fairly likely. Because I think you pair an awards win with Resident Evil 2 with the announcement of the RE3 remake, considering that so many people, I think Eurogamer and a bunch of other places said, yes, this game exists. And especially if you're using that same engine again, I bet you could probably turn around a 3 remake pretty quickly. And it would be a nice moment for Capcom to get an award and then get this announcement out there. So I think you're right on with that.
Yeah, hopefully. Yeah, and I guess I'll throw out a Nintendo-based one. I'm not sure. I don't know which one to throw out. I've got 2 that are 100% not likely ever going to happen. I'll throw out the more likely one. The more likely one would probably be Apex Legends coming to Switch, getting announced. I don't know why. I think that it just seems like something that would happen, because Apex Legends runs on an engine that isn't Frostbite. And it seems like a game that would be good for EA to try and dip in and see if they can get sales there.
I'm more surprised by the fact that Apex Legends isn't on Switch than the fact that you would predict that. I don't know if that's a Game Awards announcement, but I could, I would put a good amount of money, and I'd say it's more likely than not that Apex comes to Switch next year.
Yeah, I'm just thinking, because EA with their announcements. They do the EA Play thing, but I just don't see if they are doing a port. I don't know if EA would do it themselves, and if they don't, then where would they announce it? Will it come out early? Will they care when it comes out? Will they just throw it out there? It's
kind of feels to me.
Mm.
I was just gonna say it feels to me like a January direct announcement. Whether it's a hey, it's releasing right after the show or not, I think you farm that out to a studio like Virtuous, Iron Galaxy, Panic Button, one of these really accomplished porting houses for Switch, and you announce that in Nintendo's presentation, and you can have a really nice moment there.
Yeah, for sure. The other throw out that I was just going to throw something out was just F-Zero. Just because I just want to throw out F-Zero when every chance I can get. It's never coming back. It's dead. I need to let it go. But I won't. And I'll just throw it out there. I just think that Nintendo should have a racing game come out soon. And it should be F-Zero.
I totally agree with you. I think F-Zero is great, and I really hope Nintendo doesn't abandon it. I was so disappointed when those rumors came out about a F-Zero game being worked on for Wii U from the studio that did, I think, Burnout. I don't remember exactly what racing studio they said was working on a pitch for them. But I just want F-Zero back so badly. F-Zero and Star Fox are the two that I really want to have a bigger presence. They just make so much sense. They're such great IP, and Nintendo just needs to utilize them a little bit better. So I'm right there with you, but I don't think it's going to happen either.
Yeah, I definitely don't feel confident in either of the Nintendo predictions, but I definitely feel a bit safer about the Resident Evil, but it's just where that will get announced is more the tricky question. I just don't see any other award show or sort of announcement show where Capcom would announce it, because they don't tend to do their own sort of thing. Okay, so this has been the first ever episode of the Nintendad Coffeehouse. I've been Lachlan, and you can catch me on Twitter at ThirstyNintendo, or you can find my writing at nintendad.co.uk or in Switch Player magazine, which you can order on switchplayer.net.
I want to take a second and thank everyone for listening, and I want to thank Lachlan for being such a great host, and thank Derek for coming on too. And, I'm going to give myself a little pat on the back too. I'm going to thank good old Abram Buhner here, and if you want to hear more from me, you can just type in Abram Buhner on Twitter. My handle's at Penguins with Capes, but some letters are dropped because, God forbid, Twitter lets you have a long enough Twitter handle for what you need. But with that said, thank you guys so much for listening. And you can find my writing over at Nintendad, also nintendad.co.uk, and I'm really excited to record more of these with you guys. So, there we have it.
And I've been Derek Wright. You can find me on Twitter at Schwetty. That is SCHWETTY. And you can find my writing at nintendad.co.uk, and every now and then with a video review on our YouTube channel.
Okay, so thank you all for listening, and we will see you, hopefully, in the future, unless this has been a complete disaster and Kieran cuts it.